Entering Thursday night's game against the Milwaukee Bucks, the Memphis Grizzlies felt like they had a big fight feel on their hands. It was a fight night in Memphis in FedEx Forum. And as we've talked about here on Locked On Grizzlies, the energy was intense. There was excitement. It was a chance to make a statement, as much of a statement as you can possibly make this early in the season. We thought it was going to be a battle, and then the game started. First round, TKO, flawless victory. Lock in, Grizzlies fans. Let's dive in on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Grizzlies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are available wherever you can get podcasts for free. We also are available on YouTube. Rate, review, subscribe, like, comment, all those things help us continue to build and make better Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host for this episode, Joe Mullinax, not joined by DeMichael Cole as we enter the weekend here, flying solo. Thankfully, it's an easy episode to fly solo for in terms of content because the Memphis Grizzlies are the talk of the National Basketball Association after the complete and utter thrashing that they laid on the Milwaukee Bucks on Thursday night. So before we dive into that, I do want to shout out our sponsor for this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. The game started for Milwaukee, and then it essentially ended in terms of their capacity to win the game. It was pretty much a pillar-to-post beatdown at the hands of the Memphis Grizzlies. It was 33-18 at the end of the first quarter. Memphis was up 29 points at halftime, 70-41. Memphis dropped 47 on the heads of the Milwaukee Bucks in the third quarter. They didn't let down. They actually had their biggest gap of victory in terms of a frame in the third, and then it was all academic after that. The game was over, essentially, and Memphis gets out of their homestand with a 7-game winning streak, and they head to Oklahoma City and into the larger part of their toughening of the schedule, making that statement that DeMichael, my co-host from the Commercial Appeal, and I talked about in our previous episode. The statement was made. And, there's so many places that we could start about this particular performance from the Memphis Grizzlies. But I'm going to start with someone who is polarizing among Memphis Grizzlies fans, to say the least. And he's a player who is very much the heart and soul, identity-wise, of this franchise. And he played a massive role defensively in this contest. His name's Dillon Brooks. And he took 14 shots in 21 minutes, which isn't ideal for Dillon, right? We talk about his offensive usage a lot and how that needs to be under control in order for the Grizzlies to be the best versions of themselves. But defensively, there's a reason why he's among NBA.com's top choices for Defensive Player of the Year right now. He is that impactful in terms of what the Memphis Grizzlies want to do defensively. And on a night where Jaren Jackson Jr. reverted back, and we'll talk more about this later in the show, reverted back to what he was earlier in his career in terms of foul issues. He did not have the capacity to stay with Giannis Antetokounmpo at all in this contest. Jaren only plays 13 minutes because of foul trouble. He had played 13 minutes when he left with his fourth foul in the third quarter, and he never returned to the basketball game. He only scores 4 points in the game, 6 rebounds in 13 minutes, which is impressive for Jaren. But again, the Milwaukee Bucks were missing a lot of shots, and it wasn't because Jaren was the main focal point of the defense. It started with Dillon Brooks. He's that fulcrum in which things swung in this contest. So Jaren's return obviously strengthened the Grizzlies defense, not taking away from Jaren's impact. But in this particular contest, Jackson Jr. did not have it. He could not stay in front of Giannis. And in fairness, very few can stay in front of Giannis. But the game plan, as DeMichael and I had talked about here, there, and everywhere on this show last time we were together, it was the idea that you can't just let Giannis get to the basket. You can't give up your body to him. He's too big. He's too strong. He's going to draw contact, and they're going to give him the call. even with, the Shaquille O'Neal-esque levels of his game, you're still looking at a player in Giannis who is good in terms of basketball skill, drawing that contact on perimeter dribble penetration. Jaren could not handle that in this contest. He was given the Giannis defensive assignment, like DeMichael Cole talked about, and we'll talk more about how that was kind of a mistake for Jaren in particular. But that was the one low part, right? And again, Dillon Brooks defensively was excellent. Even without a steal, even without a block, he really did shine through in terms of his perimeter defense, his ability to limit Chris Middleton, who was his major assignment. Chris Middleton shot 1 for 12 from the field. It was probably the worst game I've ever seen Chris Middleton play. And I remember when I lived in Memphis, Tennessee, going and watch Middleton play when he was younger, rookie, second-year player, and he was cooking the Grizzlies even then. So obviously he's much better now than he was then, and he's a key cog of that Milwaukee machine. They needed him to be much better with Drew Holiday out than he was in this one, and that was a major reason the Grizzlies lost, was Chris Middleton not being able to get his offense going, and Dillon Brooks played a huge part in that. Steven Adams had an excellent game, not his usual dominant rebounding performance. He grabbed the same amount of rebounds as Jaren in 8 more minutes of playing time. Brandon Clarke grabbed the same amount of rebounds in 6 less minutes of playing time than Adams. And John Morant, David Roddy played more. David Roddy had more rebounds. John Morant, in his triple-double performance, had more rebounds than Adams. So it wasn't your typical dominant showing from Steven Adams. But what he did exceptionally well was play defense, 5 blocks in this game. Again, kind of picking up the slack for what Jaren wasn't able to do in this one. And he also was really impressive in terms of using his body. I've said multiple times, he's elite at being a large human. And he set screen assist after screen assist. There was one play where John Morant essentially had a wide open layup at the bucket that Adams screens 2 dudes. He has the initial set at the top of the key that gives Morant his initial opening. And as Adams rolls, he screens another Bucks defender and gives just a clean pass to the basket to John Morant. Adams does those things that you need to have done on a good basketball team without the stress of, is he getting enough shots? Does he have enough usage? Are we getting him enough touches? Steven Adams impacts winning without having to do all those things. That is extremely valuable for the Memphis Grizzlies to have. So Dillon Brooks was phenomenal. Steven Adams was phenomenal. John Conchar only took 4 shots. He only played 17 minutes. They didn't need much more from Conchar. He was in a position where he could contribute. David Roddy looking like an NBA basketball player after all of the trials and tribulations, all the tension about Roddy being one of the worst rotation players in the NBA. As DeMichael and I have pointed out time and again, the same exact thing could be said about Zaire Williams this time last year, and Zaire is now a player that the Grizzlies are counting on moving forward. David Roddy, 15 points off the bench in 24 minutes played, 7 rebounds, just a really strong performance from him. And then another kudos, I've been hard on these 2 guys, Tyus Jones and Brandon Clarke. Brandon Clarke was a perfect 6 for 6 from the field in this game in 15 minutes of play, 12 points, 6 rebounds, just an utterly dominant and efficient performance at and around the rim. He had his floater going, his little mid-range look that he likes to hit in terms of a little pop and floated up there, a little floater action, jump hook almost kind of shot that Clarke, if you watch the Grizzlies play, he's pretty good at that. That's his spot, so to speak. Wasn't always falling for him earlier in the season and most certainly fell against Milwaukee. Tyus Jones, 3 for 3 from beyond the arc. He's almost at 40% three-point shooting. He was at almost 40% three-point shooting last year. That seems like an aspect of his game that's likely going to stick around. And Tyus was a team best plus 32 in this contest, plus 32 in 19 minutes of play. Again, 3 for 3 from 3. Clarke and Tyus combined 12 for 15 from the field. So those 2 guys are extremely important in terms of what this team is trying to do. Kudos to Santi Aldama. Zaire Williams looked good in spots. This team is deep. And one of the major questions coming into the season was, would that depth that was lost in the eyes of many, myself included, in terms of moving on from DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson, not saying those were poor long-term decisions. They were the right decision long-term, but it turns out they're more correct in the short term than most of us realized. You could wear fan-colored glasses and say that, David Roddy was going to be better, that David Roddy fit better. There was no evidence to suggest that. We're seeing these guys improve. It's continued bets on themselves in that front office, the development that we talked about in the last episode, that continues to shine through for this Grizzlies organization. And it was on full display against the Milwaukee Bucks. There is no doubt about that. So remarkable win. Congratulations to the Grizzlies. It wasn't all perfect, like we'll talk more about here next, but just a phenomenal performance. I haven't talked about Joe Mullinax yet, who we'll cover more here as the show goes on. But again, kudos to the Grizzlies. Just a really impressive showing against a good Milwaukee Bucks team. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the NHTSA. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think about calling a ride. Nah, you don't need a ride. You live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds that you're going to get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up. You lose your license. You lose your job. You total your car. You kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of drunk driving. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Hopefully you had Joe Morant triple-double, whatever you would need for Prize Picks there in terms of your daily fantasy entries. Joe Morant to score more than 9.5 points, grab more than 9.5 rebounds, dished more than 9.5 assists. He was pretty impressive in that game. And the great thing about Prize Picks is it's extremely easy to play. You pick 2 to 6 players. Ja would have been a great one to select. And if they go for more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any given entry. There's no competing against other people. It's you against the projections that are available. And you can go NBA, NFL, all the way into Eurobasket, cricket, literally any sport that there is. There are so many projections available on Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less with safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states as well as in Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Jaren Jackson Jr. had a rough night against the Milwaukee Bucks. And we're not going to dwell on this. I just wanted to point this out in the show because Jaren was pointed out by myself as well as DeMichael as the X factor for this game. His ability to defend Giannis, to stay on the floor in terms of foul trouble. DeMichael recommended putting Steven Adams on Giannis to start and having Jaren be on Brook Lopez. And that wasn't how the game started. And Jaren really struggled trying to stay in front of Giannis. I understand the logic of trying to give Jaren that opportunity. He is your best defender. He is a guy that you hope to continue to see grow. You eventually get to a Western Conference Finals and NBA Finals. You want to have a guy like Jaren that can play some on-ball defense. He just didn't have it in this game in that particular area, and the foul trouble, which has been an issue for Jaren throughout his career, hasn't been as much the last year or so. Have reared its ugly head in this one. I want to stress, Giannis Antetokounmpo is the best player on the planet. He's physically dominant in just about every facet. He's Shaq with a handle, and he's a little leaner, of course. He's just wonderful to watch play. He's a blast. He didn't have as much fun in Memphis in this particular game, but that obviously doesn't take away all the other phenomenal work that Giannis has done throughout his career. So Jaren struggled staying with Giannis in this one. And I think that when you look at the numbers, Giannis really struggles as a three-point shooter from the mid-range. He's a very good passer, and Giannis had that on display throughout the Grizzlies game. Anytime something good offensively did happen for Milwaukee, it often came off of a Giannis Antetokounmpo assist. But force somebody else to make you lose, right? Force somebody else to beat you. Brook Lopez, make him beat you. He has a good three-point shot. He's been a very good defensive player for Milwaukee throughout this season, but he's not Giannis. Make somebody that isn't Giannis beat you. You have Dillon Brooks clearly being able to lock down Chris Middleton, at least on this night. He was able to do it pretty decisively. So if Brook Lopez beats you and scores 30 points and Giannis has 15 assists, you tip your cap and say, hey, the Bucks are a hell of a team. That was not the case. And I think that that's just the one minor issue was not making that adjustment sooner so that Jaren could have been out there more, because you're not always going to get the performance from the bench that you got. The completely impressive shooting, between Roddy Jones, Zaire Williams, Santi Aldama, Brandon Clarke. Only Williams shot under 50% from the field, and Williams was 5 for 11, which is a perfectly acceptable performance. You're not going to get 6 for 9 Tyus Jones every night, or 6 for 6 Brandon Clarke. You're not going to get 4 for 6 Santi Aldama. That's just not going to happen every time you go out on the floor. You can't count on that. You need Jaren to be somebody that can be there consistently. He has that physical ability. In this game, I think the early assignment, and Jaren got frustrated. A lot of the same kind of body language and facial expressions that we saw earlier in his career for one night shown through. I fully expect Jaren to bounce back, and he should be fresh, only playing 13 minutes as they head into their next game against the Oklahoma City Thunder in OKC. Road trip coming up. But going back to the positives, we didn't talk about Ja in the first segment. Just a remarkable performance. He did a little bit of Russell Westbrook rebound hunting and assist hunting there towards the end, but he had a triple-double in less than 30 minutes of play. He logged 26 minutes on the court against the Milwaukee Bucks and 25 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, and one of the very best plus-minuses on the team in plus 30. He continues to amaze, and he made a layup that was like a 360 where he was fouled. He showed tremendous effort multiple times on trying to dive for the ball out of bounds and throwing it off of Bucks players to save possessions. Just really an impressive performance from Ja on both ends. He's grown as a defender, like we talked about before, and he is still able to be that offensive focal point. Javon Carter had a little bit of success defensively. Morant was 9 for 21, so not the most efficient evening for Ja. 2 for 8 from beyond the arc for Morant as well. But obviously, when you have a triple-double, I don't think Javon Carter is walking around Milwaukee's locker room saying that he shut down Big 12. I don't think that's what occurred in any way, shape, or form. Ja still had a lot of success in this one, and he found a lot of it in transition, where Milwaukee really had been successful up until this point in the season, and they lost that success. So the specialness of Ja Morant shone through. Unsurprisingly, right? He does a lot of these things on a night in, night out basis at this stage of the game. And, I just reflecting back on that game and saying that it was a statement win, right? Because there was a statement that was made. And I'm not sure that it's an NBA Finals contender. The Western Conference is still wide open. Memphis beating Milwaukee by 31 doesn't make them that much more impressive to the New Orleans Pelicans or the Phoenix Suns. But I do think that it allows for us to dream a little bit in terms of what is possible as this team solidifies themselves at the top of the Western Conference over these next few weeks. The unfortunate news about Steph Curry going down with injury, not going to be out there for the next few weeks, likely to miss the Grizzlies game on Christmas Day. So the Warriors will continue to struggle. Memphis has a window of a couple of games against Phoenix to gain some games on them. There is an opening here as the team gets healthier over the next month or so, with Bane hopefully returning either by the end of this calendar year, maybe Christmas, but probably a little bit after, definitely around the New Year's time, at least by reports. That's the goal from the team themselves. A result like this allows for you to dream, right? It allows for you to think, wow, maybe they really can do this. Maybe they really are the best team in the Western Conference, and they're capable of standing toe-to-toe with a team that has a veteran presence. The Grizzlies don't really have a veteran presence against Steven Adams and Tyus Jones. Those aren't superstar veteran players. Giannis is a superstar veteran player with a championship pedigree. You've got Chris Middleton, championship pedigree. Drew Holiday eventually with a championship pedigree. And obviously Holiday and Bane kind of cancel each other out in terms of this particular game. But for one night, you envision a game 3 in Memphis of the NBA Finals, and the Grizzlies being able to stand toe-to-toe with one of the very best that the NBA has to offer and the best player in the National Basketball Association. The result of this game, even more than one game out of 82, is it confirms what a lot of people believed all along and what almost everyone who follows this team, myself included, now more fully understand. The development system of this Grizzlies coaching staff, the scouting, the culture, it's among the best, if not the best, in the National Basketball Association. And that matters a heck of a lot. And with the star, Joe Morant, and multiple good players to great players by his side, the Grizzlies' time may well be now. And it's okay to dream that a little bit more after that showing against the Milwaukee Bucks. Thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports podcast. Today, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, basketball, the World Cup. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. They are the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll talk more about the very impressive Grizzlies as they head out on their road trip. A change of scenery coming from Memphis, starting with the Oklahoma City Thunder. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am here flying solo. Joe Mullinax. We missed Michael. Hopefully we'll have him back heading into next week. Christmas week coming up. It'll be wonderful to have a little bit more downtime to dive more fully into this Grizzlies team. You know, I write for SB Nation again, and I write for Fansided. Haven't written for them in a while, but hopefully I will over these next couple of weeks. And, you know, I have my Substack, Written in the Dark. So I'm getting back into the routine of writing, which I did all the time over at Grizzly Bear Blues and had fallen out after leaving there last May. Excuse me. And watching this Grizzlies team and thinking about where they're going in terms of their road trip that's coming up, because they currently boast a 7-game win streak, but they're going to be tested. You know, there's a real test coming for them that, you know, DeMichael and I talked about in the first segment of yesterday's show, the schedule being weak, so to speak. And now they've got 2 with Phoenix. They've got the Golden State Warriors, Sacramento Kings, lots of tough opponents outside of the upcoming game with the Oklahoma City Thunder on the horizon. And something that we'll learn about this Grizzlies team over this road trip is the value of that culture, the team chemistry that has been talked about so much, the vibes, how immaculate they may well be. Because as well as the Grizzlies played against the Milwaukee Bucks, adversity is going to strike at some point on this road trip. It might be on Christmas Day. It might be in one of the games against the Suns, the Sacramento Kings, who are rivaling Memphis in terms of vibes. Memphis hosts the Pelicans before they play the Kings in that New Year's home and home back-to-back. So I really do feel that we're going to learn a lot about this team over the next couple of weeks. And that starts with the Oklahoma City Thunder game, because now, after shellacking the Milwaukee Bucks the way you did, and after you have the opportunity to watch that film, see the ways that Jaren can get better, see the ways that the team can improve their schemes, find different looks, that's one of the best parts about this, whether it's adding Desmond Bane in terms of health or whether it's just general youth and growth and improvement. There's still room for development among these Grizzlies. The Milwaukee Bucks certainly can play better. I would imagine the next time these two teams play, Milwaukee will not have that kind of a showing. But Memphis can continue to find ways to have sustained excellence, not just sustained success, but sustained excellence. They have the talent in place. They have the culture in place. And your character, not just as a person, but as an athlete, as a team, it's revealed in moments of adversity, right? It's not built by it, it's revealed. So how they respond in those spots out on the road or in those adverse situations of a back-to-back, what that looks like. We start getting those answers with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and it starts with you had success against Milwaukee. Now you're playing a team that you're supposed to beat. Right? Memphis was the favorite going into the Milwaukee Bucks game, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were supposed to win, right? If the Milwaukee Bucks had beaten the Grizzlies, Would anybody have been surprised? No one would have been surprised. Giannis Antetokounmpo plays for the Milwaukee Bucks. Chris Middleton plays for the Milwaukee Bucks. Memphis was without Bane. Milwaukee was without Holiday. Again, essentially an equal shift in terms of importance. Not debating who's better. I'll save that for another conversation. But you just had a nearly flawless win against a good Milwaukee team that you dominated on the glass. You outperformed them in almost every single category. And of course, the most important one being the scoreboard. You go into Oklahoma City with a good player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who has the capacity to score the basketball at a high and efficient rate. An OKC team that is young, that has length, that is hungry. They're not going to lie down for you. If you come out with any energy other than something at least close to what you did for Milwaukee and that level of precision, that professional focus and meticulous execution that was almost constantly on display for Memphis against the Bucks. If they don't have that and they lose to the Thunder, now you're in a spot where you're feeling pretty down after you should be using this opportunity as a launching point. So I think that this game coming up with OKC, and obviously Memphis very familiar with the Thunder at this point. I believe this is the third game they've played against the Thunder this season. They've seen them multiple times. The game plan's not going to shift much. And they still don't really have somebody that can stick with Jaren Jackson Jr. It'd be a wonderful chance for a bounce-back game for Jaren to restore confidence in what Jackson Jr. has become as a player. Because, again, this was the first time, put the offensive shooting performance from his first game, off to the back burner. This is the first time beyond that where Jaren looked like the guy that was struggling mightily in the past with his foul issues, getting into a rhythm of a game. You want to get him back to a place where he understands his importance to the team, how valuable he is. And I'm sure his teammates are telling him that. They're hyping him up. It was one game. That doesn't negate the other amazing things that Jaren has done for the improvements to the Grizzlies defense. But as an athlete, you get frustrated when you don't perform the way that you think you're capable of or the way that you thought you should have. Even in a victory, you want to be in a better spot to help contribute. So the OKC game is a great shot at getting Jaren back in the fold and back into a rhythm, restoring that confidence, going to a really big stretch against Phoenix, against Golden State, and these other squads that they're going to be seeing on this road trip. And then again, when they come home around New Year's, those games against the Pelicans and the Kings loom large too. We're going to know a lot more about who this Grizzlies team is coming out of those contests. So with the Thunder, it starts there. You are feeling yourself, understandably so. How do you respond if OKC goes on a run? How do you respond if the Thunder do to you what you did to the Bucks if you're the Memphis Grizzlies and the Thunder start hot? How do you bounce back? This team, time and again, has talked about being even keel, right? And you heard even evidence of that coming out of the press availabilities after the Milwaukee win. Statement game, hyped up as a big fight, and it was a first-round TKO. The Grizzlies are celebrating it as well. They should. They were excited. They were doing the wave in FedEx Forum, for goodness sakes. But it's one of 82. Can't get too high, can't get too low. You take with you the confidence that you can play with anybody in the National Basketball Association, that even without one of your best players, and even with the other one that isn't named Ja Morant of your best players having an off night, you can hang. You have the depth. You have the capacity within your schemes to play with anyone in the NBA. You take that knowledge, you build that confidence, you apply it to the next one. You have to continue to move forward. Staying stagnant, going backwards, will only prevent Memphis from achieving their goals, which more and more look like at the very least a Western Conference Finals appearance. And you hear Ja Morant talk about it all the time. They want to win a championship. They are closer to that reality after the performance against Milwaukee than they were before it. But the next step matters too. And that's what I'm going to be looking for over the weekend here from these Grizzlies. Thanks for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. The next time we're together, DeMichael will hopefully be back with me. I believe that's the plan. We'll review the Oklahoma City Thunder game. Hopefully we're talking about another victory and the winning streak continues. We'll take a deeper dive into the Phoenix Suns, who the Grizzlies will see a couple of times over the next week or so. And then, of course, looking ahead to Christmas this coming Sunday. Or the Sunday after the next one, excuse me. A really exciting week for the Memphis Grizzlies coming up in terms of national exposure, lots of national television games. That's one of the benefits of having a superstar. But again, the league is on notice after this Milwaukee performance. This was a statement win that, to DeMichael's point, they hadn't really made. This is their best victory of the season by far. The follow-through matters, and we'll continue to talk about that and much more the next time we're together on Locked On Grizzlies. Continue to rate, review, subscribe, all those things. Make sure you're making us a part of your Grizzlies experience on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, whatever they're called now. However you get a podcast, you can find Locked On Grizzlies. Please make sure you're subscribing and following along on YouTube. You're liking, you're commenting. Interact with us, help us make the show better, and help us continue to grow this Locked On Grizzlies podcast, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a wonderful weekend. Until next time, I'm Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. This is Locked On Grizzlies.